forced tenure has to be tied to manufacturing is an old concept. It no longer is relevant. And what you just imagine, John, if even if it was publicly owned ownership, if you divided up the province into a series of community, First Nations, non-First Nations communities coming together and having multiple tenures that they managed on an area base, and that they supplied a certain amount of wood products to a market, the industry would look at the market and say, here's how much wood we can expect from these different sources over time. Here's the size of a mill that we can build to facilitate the making money from that. I think that's one of the cornerstones of where we need to go. And frankly, I don't really think that big industry is going to argue as much about this as they would have used to. I think that they're kind of tired of this business, and they're on the way out. Frankly, I think they're voting with their feet. And if we are wise, we're going to facilitate this through the First Nations involvement in tenure and forest management. We're going to facilitate more of that community-based management. It has to be area-based. That's another concept, John, that's absolutely critical no matter what. It has to be an area base, and there can only be one plan for that area, and in my mind, one manager, which could be one manager being a coalition or a cooperative or whatever. It can represent a huge amount of people, but the bottom line, there has to be a long-term plan that you allude to long-term. It has to be taken out of the political realm, and it has to be localized, and then you get one implementation of that plan, and you get management of forests in a more
area based, so that they that do the work can benefit from the take ownership. But I see now, Jeff, and I agree with you 100%, but I see now, in the 60 years that I've been around, nearly 60 years, around this area and watched the forest industry because it's my passion. I love the industry, I love BC, I love the forest industry. And I'm troubled by where we are and where we are not going yet, but we will, I believe, and I will be a proponent of that every single day of the week, is that if I look around, I look at Fort Nelson, Fort St. John, I look at Chetwynd, I look at Mackenzie, I look at Fort St. James, I look at Stewart Lake, I look at Smithers, I look at Houston. All those communities have lost their mills, and although the timber is still there, but it's simply a sign of that this system that we have doesn't work. And I believe that a long time ago, in the late 80s, early 90s, I was the founding president, as I said to you, of the BC Council of Value Added Wood Processing. It's not saying that they should be the ones that have the timber, but that innovative primary in combination with intensive secondary is part of the model where things should be going forward. And if I look at government policy, I look at the intentions paper, on the three main objectives of it. First Nations should be more involved. They are, and they should be. No question about that. And I believe they will have about 12 to 15, to as high as maybe 20% of the AAC. They will share in the revenue. I agree with that. From there on in, what are they going to do from there on in terms of what are values to them? They will make that choice. In terms of communities should be more involved in it, as you were saying earlier. The second element of the intentions paper, in terms of preserving old growth, I agree with that to a certain extent. I'm not an expert, you are. I'm troubled by seeing old growth timber that is maybe 8 inches or 10 inches because it's 150 years old is designated to be old growth. I don't think that that's the right way to go, but there is a way of doing more effective managing of old growth, and I'm not against that. In terms of having more value-added manufacturing, obviously I'm very involved in that, and that has have no value-added, increase in value-added. And since the intentions paper, well meant by the then Premier John Horgan, the value-added sector has further disappeared, by what I suggest is a lack of involvement in stimulating that sector by the COFI, by the Council of
My dad would roll over in his grave listening to this conversation again, because we would commonly talk about the value added sector and what was required to support a value added sector. To me, I'm getting so tired of listening to successive governments talk to me about what they're going to do for the value added sector when they're missing the core pieces of this, which are availability of fiber to on a long-term basis that allows these independent and entrepreneurial facilities to figure out what they've got in front of them, what they can do, and how they can manage their process.